evening, I would like to call on Dr. Catherine Bergman, the president of St. Jerome's University, to offer you some words of welcome.
Good evening, Cardinal Collins, distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends of St. Jerome's University. It is my pleasure to welcome you here this evening for our lecture series in Catholic Thought. This year, our lecture series has focused on the transformation of the Church that has taken place in the 50 years since Vatican II. This evening's talk will explore her relationship with the knowledge creation of the secular world and its impact on global social paradigms. We are extremely fortunate this evening to be able to extend a very warm welcome to a distinguished colleague and SJU alumnus. Tonight, Thomas Cardinal Collins will share with us his insight about how faith and reason can work together. The focus of a Catholic liberal education is to support open academic inquiry and secular excellence, while remaining grounded in our gospel values to provide benefit to our whole society. We hope that you will find this evening's lecture an engaging and provocative experience. At St. Jerome's University, we embrace and celebrate this philosophy of a liberal education, of educating the whole person. We are committed to learning and academic excellence grounded in the gospel values of love, truth, and justice. Our goal at SJU is to educate our students intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually, teaching them to use their education and talents as leaders for service to our global society by promoting openness and the common good. Through a Catholic liberal education, we provide our students with the skills necessary to meet the ethical and moral challenges of our society today and the future, by developing informed and courageous citizens. At SJU, it is about what our students can do, but even more importantly, it is about who they are as a person that reflects the true value of a Catholic liberal education at St. Jerome's University. Thank you again for joining us this evening. And yes, true to the Catholic Lecture Series, the weather did not disappoint us. We have a theme going here. Thank you, Christina. If this is your first time attending a lecture, we hope that you will consider attending other lectures. For our loyal supporters, we thank you for your ongoing commitment to SJU and look forward to welcoming you at our upcoming lectures and events. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Since its beginnings in 1982, this lecture series has been a significant way in which St. Jerome's University reaches out to our local community, providing opportunities to engage us in critical issues of our time. And so we welcome people who spoke to us about religion and politics, about spirituality, issues in healthcare, international relations and human rights, religious pluralism, ecumenism, interfaith dialogue, and religion in the media. This is all part of this year's theme, which is a celebration of the 50th anniversary of the beginning of Vatican II. When Blessed John XXIII called this council, he had two major goals in mind. One was a desire for Christian unity. The other was his hope for aggiornamento, the renewal or bringing up to date of the Catholic Church. And many of us remember the conversation about it being a time of opening up the windows and letting in fresh air in a spirit of willingness to engage with the modern world. We were invited then to read the signs of the times, to be in solidarity with the whole of humanity, especially the poor or afflicted. In this year's lecture series, we've been envisioning the next 50 years and considering the signs of our own time. One of those signs that is important to so many of us here tonight are the developments in Catholic education. And so we are very honored to have with us His Eminence Thomas Cardinal Collins, Archbishop of Toronto, to deliver this year's Waterloo Catholic District School Board lecture. A native of Guelph, Ontario, we are proud to say that Cardinal Collins received his undergraduate degree in English from this St. Jerome's University. He then went on to receive a Bachelor of Theology degree from St. Peter's Seminary in London, an MA in English from Western University, a licentiate in Sacred Scripture for the Pontifical Biblical Institute in Rome, and a doctorate in theology from the Gregorian University in Rome. Cardinal Collins has also received 2 honorary degrees, a Doctor of Divinity honoris causa from the University of St. Michael's College in Toronto, and a Doctor of Human Letters degree from Niagara University. After holding various academic appointments, Cardinal Collins was appointed as Bishop of St. Paul, Alberta in 1997. 2 years later, he was named the Archbishop of Edmonton. And then in 2001, while he was still in Edmonton, he was named Apostolic Administrator of St. Paul, and he held these positions until he was appointed in 2007 as the Archbishop of Toronto. Among many positions that he holds, Cardinal Collins is the President of the Ontario Conference of Catholic Bishops. He has served as a member of the Pontifical Council for Social Communications, as well as being involved in the Synod of Bishops at a Special Assembly for the Middle East. In February 2012, Cardinal Collins was elevated to the College of Cardinals. He is the 4th cardinal in the history of the Archdiocese of Toronto and the 16th in Canadian history. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished speaker for this evening, Thomas Cardinal Collins.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. I could say to be back here at St. Jerome's, although when I was at St. Jerome's, this building didn't exist. So I must admit it's a new experience there. But it is always good to come back here and to celebrate the great gift which this university is to the Diocese of Hamilton and beyond, to our whole country. And it is an example of Catholic education, Catholic university education, as also in Toronto, we have St. Michael's College and various other places throughout the country where Catholic education flourishes at the university level. And also, of course, we have Catholic education in our province, and also this is true in Alberta and Saskatchewan, publicly funded Catholic education, very large Catholic school systems, and Catholic education is found in private forms and various other ways throughout our country. So this is a crucial and important theme that we need to reflect upon, because there are always struggles facing Catholic education. I remember once a lawyer who has done a lot of fighting in battles for Catholic education said, somebody once asked me, is it true that publicly funded Catholic education is in danger of being destroyed? And he said, well, yes, absolutely. It has been since about 1840. and so it will ever be. This is something we're always on the edge. And that's why we need to know who we are. We need to know what we're doing. And we need to have a deep and profound commitment that Catholic education, whether it be elementary, secondary, university level, whatever it may be, that it is lived to the full, that it shines brightly in this world, that it is what it's meant to be. Then it will be something that we will all eagerly celebrate and that we will support in different ways. So, why do we have a Catholic educational system? What makes it special? Whether it be, I think, particularly of our publicly funded system in Ontario, but even more broadly, why do we have Catholic education? Well, first of all, I think any Catholic school system at any level needs to do all that any competent school system does to help people, to prepare students for success in the struggle to get ahead in the world, because after all, food is a very helpful thing. It adds to the quality of life, and people able to earn their daily bread is a good thing. So we hope that we have a marketable degree that people can do that. That's important. And also, of course, to contribute to a better society. That too is something that we need to reflect upon. We need to have, any school needs to be able to help the students to do that. But there's got to be more than that, to a full education. Because what's the point of being well-fed, having a job, doing all this, if one does not know the purpose of life? If we are lost in all the various struggles that can afflict us in this vale of tears. So our Catholic schools whatever the level, year in and year out, are meant to be places that are daily shaped by a search for the answers to the basic questions of meaning in life, which must eventually be addressed by all of us, even by those without any faith. The great spiritual and moral questions have become more and more pressing as the power of technology increases the effect of human actions. I remember when I was a student here a couple of years ago, I looked out my residence window over there at that enormous temple to mathematics that was there. And I remember going over once, I was just an English student, so I approached with trepidation the great wooden doors. Oh, they still have these great wooden doors. And they seemed enormous at the time. You go through and you look down at this, through a glass wall at this huge room with enormous filing cabinet type things. This was a computer. It was a computer. It made funny things happen. A little paper shot out and white-robed priests sort of the computer were feeding the thing. Now, you can fit all of that into a BlackBerry. In fact, it has all been fit into a BlackBerry because that's where BlackBerries came from. So, but it's so powerful, so amazing, you know. You can do all kinds of things. You can pray the divine office. You can play Angry Birds. You can do all kinds of things with the power of technology. But this enormous power that is there, it's not enough to know it or even to master it. Because such knowledge can even be worse than no knowledge at all when that expertise is used for evil ends, as indeed it can be. The computer, the internet, all these things can be used for good or for ill. It's not increasing the quantity of the power that matters, it's how we use it. And for that we need to answer the deep questions of life. And those are the ones we seek to deal with in Catholic education. As we begin this 21st century, and the issues of purpose and meaning are essential in the formation of the generation that will wield for good or ill such enormous technological power. Education always involves an element of formation. What is essential is to form, to help a person become a better person, not just to fill their heads with knowledge or to give them a greater ability. You always have formation. It's simply good or bad. It's essential to Catholic education, and it's essential really if we're going to be valuable to our society. So our Catholic schools at whatever level are meant to be, in the tradition of the Old Testament, houses of wisdom. Not simply factories packaging knowledge or helping people to develop skills that will allow them to prosper in this world. A relatively small portion of the necessary effect in forming students in holy wisdom is the result of what is found in the classroom, the content of what is taught, the skills developed. Much more is brought about by the example of the people, the teachers, professors, trustees in the system, those who work in the schools, all the people, the family, the parish, and of course the students who are associated with Catholic schools. We explicitly proclaim a formational intent as the foundation of Catholic education, according to the values of the gospel. That means that our schools and all who are connected to them need to be alert to the needs of the world beyond the school, the world into which God asks us to shed the light of Christ. It's not just making a person more understanding, more learned, more whatever. John Henry Newman got fired on that point. He was a tutor when he was a young professor at Oriel College, and the head of the college simply wanted him to pass on classical education. But John Henry Newman thought, no, I have to help these people, these students of mine, the whole person, to become a better person. And the classical education was simply a tool, an instrument towards that goal. And because the professor, the head of the college, didn't agree with that, he basically fired him. And he then used the extra time to study the fathers of the church with all kinds of beautiful results. Nothing is more practical nor more valuable in a system of education than providing students with an occasion to deepen their appreciation of the beautiful, the true, and the good. And when we seek to do that, we're not just looking for knowledge. We're coming close to an experience of the Lord God, who is ultimately the beautiful, the true, and the good. Late have I loved you, O beauty ever ancient, ever new. Late have I loved you. These are the words of Augustine. And that they're still very true. You were within, and I was outside, and outside I sought you. And deformed, ran after those forms of beauty you had made. You were with me, O Lord, and I was not with you. And those things held me back from you. Things whose only being was to be in you. You flashed, you shone, you broke through my blindness. You cried, you called. You broke through my deafness. You touched me, and I yearn for your embrace. It is that experience of the whole person which ultimately is the goal of Catholic education. It is sublime. The sacraments, the teaching of doctrine which illuminates the context of life, the external signs of a community rooted in faith, and the way in which members of that community are challenged to love others, to see the face of Christ in every person. This is the heart of it all. To see others as children of God, and to realize the way in which love and justice guide the relationship of the school community, the university community, to that which surrounds it. I'm glad to hear of the way in which students of this university are helping a child in Peru. That has to be. I mean, you can't just be, sorry, I don't have time for you. I've got to live from the neck up. We can't have that. We need to use our reason. I always say God put our heads in so prominent a place in our bodies that we must assume he wants us to use them. And if you ever get a purely emotional religion, put on the running shoes, head for the door. It's not from God. But it has to be the whole person. I always think, my old little handy bishop's trick, and when someone comes to me with proposals, which they do every half hour most afternoons, usually very enthusiastically, as I say, what does it say to the head, the heart, and the hands? Head, heart, and hands. Because after all, grade 1 used to be years ago. Why are we here? To know, to love, and to serve. And so it all comes to that. That's that deeper wisdom we need to be in touch with. There's no substitute for that. There's no truer measure, though, of what our real values are than how we spend our money and our time. They always say, you know, about any institution, the mission statement tells you what they like to be, and the budget tells you what they are. Without being too cynical, that's true, isn't it? But even more so, how we spend our time, because the most precious thing we have is not our bank account, it's our time. How we spend our time indicates what's valuable. If we can find that, we know the answer. So we need in our schools and in our universities and all Catholic institutions, we need to put time and money to support the most important things. That's crucial. And so we need to reflect on that. And in the light of both faith and reason, and there's no conflict between these two wings on which we fly, Catholic schools help form all who are engaged in them to attend to the key issues. And if I were to give a title for this talk, it's to fly to the heart of things. I got that line from a book called The Spiritual Aeneid by Ronald Knox. Well, Ronald Knox is a great, great writer in the early first half of the 20th century. Super, super brilliant. One of those disgusting people who can just, you know, write Greek at the age of 5 and things like that, you know. What can you do? A really wonderful man. And he went to Eton, not the Eton Center. He went to Eton, there's one in England, you know, where the playing fields. And he went to Oxford and all the rest. He had a very fine, highly cultured, elite education, the best there was in the world at the time. And then he ultimately came to a fulfillment of his faith in 1917. He entered the Catholic Church. He was ordained a priest. He spent the rest of his life doing marvelous things. He's amazing, witty, brilliant, a great and holy man. G.K. Chesterton was talking about, you know, there's another Knox, Ronald Knox, but there was John Knox, the Scottish reformer, very grim, rather severe. And Mary, Queen of Scots, Mary of Holyrood Palace, she had a rough time with John Knox. And so G.K. Chesterton once said, who didn't like papists, he said, what is it now? Mary of Holyrood must take delight to see what grim historic shade it shocks, to find wit, laughter, in the popish creed, sparkle and glitter in the name of Knox. So Ronald Knox, the other one, he he had always a little bit looked down on the second sort of imitation schools of the Catholic Church when he was at Eton and Oxford. The Catholic Church had a parallel group, Stonyhurst and places like this, which were intending to be kind of like Eton, only Catholic. And he wrote later that he had come to realize, with all of his sublime education, that the boys of Stonyhurst, unlike him, they had been taught, he says, to fly to the heart of things, to see what really matters. And I say, if you want to say, what's the point of St. Jerome's University? What's the point of the Catholic school system in Ontario? Is it worth fighting for? Because we're going to have to, you know. Is it worth fighting for? Does it help the students to fly to the heart of things? Or does it simply allow them to be colonized by this culture of ours, which is not perhaps so wholesome? So to fly to the heart of things is what Catholic education is all about. And so, finish the talk now, let's all go and have no, I do believe my favorite psalm is By the Waters of Babylon, because I like to Babylon, and so I will go a little bit further. I got this habit of punning here at this university. So when we're facing the problems we're facing, oh my gosh, the problems. We're in a culture where we need to have this, where people are treated like numbers. You know, where people are dismissed, where like objects, things. You know, we have to love persons and use things. Instead, we love things and use people. This is just not right. So in this world in which we live, we've got to fly to the heart of things, to see the face of Christ in each person, and to realize our minds are there to help us to see the beautiful, the true, and the good, and so therefore to be able to live rightly. Not enough to just simply to be well, but superficially, brittly educated, just in a brittle way. So for that, to fly to the heart of the things, we fly on the wings, as John Paul said in Faith and Reason, of faith and reason. We fly on the wings, and every bird needs both of them. Catholic education needs to affirm confidently what the great medieval universities assumed, that faith and reason are the foundation of education. It's the faith part that much of education is allergic to these days. It seemed to be something of a sentiment, a little schlocky, a little bit embarrassing. But no. Grace builds on nature. The mission of a Catholic school or university is to use the gift of reason to examine the natural world around us and the world within the human heart. Grace builds on nature, but does not overwhelm it. Creation itself is good, and much of what occurs in Catholic schools and universities will not relate directly to matters of faith, but rather to the use of reason. Since God has given us this great gift, we need not fear it, though its great power can be abused. When the power of reason makes us arrogant, then we become very smart at hurting people. Any great gift is like electricity when it's on, which occasionally it is today, and that is that it can bring light or it can kill you. So reason is like a car, can be dangerous, but it's meant to bring us to God. And so we're to use our minds to search for the truth, to discover reality. And most of the curriculum in any Catholic school will relate to natural things, not always talking about faith. But all human inquiry must be based on foundational premises. Archimedes said, "Give me a place to stand, and I will move the world." To do anything worthwhile, we need a place to stand. And for Catholic education, the foundation on which we stand is our awareness of the divine context for human endeavor within the natural world. That awareness comes to us by way of both faith and reason. The Lord can illuminate our path to a remarkable degree through our exercise of the gift of unaided reason. But the full picture can be attained only through the gift of faith, which is an act of the intellect, moved by the will, moved by the grace of God. That's what Thomas Aquinas describes faith as. An act of the intellect, moved by the will, moved by the grace of God. It's an act of the intellect. Jesus is the Lord, for example, is a statement, just as much as this music stand is here. an act of the intellect, moved by the will, because it's not the kind of thing where I can simply see it. We need to have moved by the will, moved by the grace of God. Faith itself involves the use of reason. It's not just an emotion, which is the false view of faith, which is common in our society. John Henry Newman, who articulated with such power the idea of a university and who ran an elementary school and a high school as well, also insisted on the rational dimension of the act of faith. In Catholic education at all levels, reason is at home in an environment of faith. And faith itself is intimately linked to reason. A purely subjective and emotional faith is a caricature of the faith which God gives to us and to which he invites us. So a Catholic school must hold to the most rigorous standards of academic excellence in the use of reason, partly because what we do, we must do well. How can we not do that? We do it for the Lord, everything we do, whatever it may be. But also because in Catholic Christianity, our understanding is that faith is something that comes as well intimately related to reason. Faith and religion are not just subjective emotional experiences, although there can be substitutes that are that, but that's not what they really are. Perhaps that is, flippantly secular mindset dismisses religion basically as a kind of a security blanket needed to cope with the threatening world, but that just isn't true. For one thing, the sign of our faith is the cross of Jesus Christ, which is hardly a security blanket. We don't walk into Mass with a happy face on a stick. It's very much in touch with reality, the suffering that is there. Think of Mother Teresa spending an hour in adoration, celebrating the Eucharist, the rest of the night, the rest of the day on the streets, serving the poorest of the poor. That's the mix. People deep in faith, head, to know, to love, to serve. If we just serve, we're busy, busy, busy. If we just love, we're mushy, mushy, mushy. If we just think, no, we're brittle and snap. It's got to be all together. Which is more important, to know, to love, or to serve? Yes. So in any case, there's no such thing as a clinically pure educational institution. We are involved in reason here. We're not corrupted by other things that sort of draw. No, not at all. I mean, we all have foundations. It's just the question is not, do we have foundations or not? Do we have assumptions? Do we have faith foundations, for example? The question is just whether they're good or not, whether they're sandy or solid. And some of the foundations which don't work, I would just suggest a few of them as foundations for society or for the whole educational enterprise: agnosticism, utilitarianism, relativism. All three of them are used sometimes as a kind of foundation for the whole construction built upon it, whether it's life or a school. Agnosticism, the idea that we cannot know anything for sure, and that the ultimate point is to have many questions but never an answer. This is sort of like a game in which the players are always shooting but never scoring. It's superficially attractive, rather energetic actually, but a fruitful intellectual life cannot be based upon that. We do have to have questions, but the point of a question is to know. If we're always just questioning, it's just like, we are people who seek to know. We are people who have questions, but we also have answers. Now, we don't have answers that are superficial and say, I have all the answers, but we do need to presume that when you shoot the puck, there's a goal that goes through, It's sort of, if one doesn't accept that, one can live on a desert island and be quite content. But to live life fruitfully, agnosticism just doesn't work. Utilitarianism is the idea that education is simply or mainly a matter of preparing people to do useful things, rather than forming people to be free. This will draw plenty of funding, but there's no future in that. Just simply to help people to be busier doing what? Useful things. But for what purpose, ultimately? We always have to ask the deeper questions, not just simply immediate usefulness. And relativism is the idea that education is not a search for truth, but rather the random collection of ideas of many flavors and many colors, but no meaning. Now this is chaos, and is no sure foundation for anything, including life. After all, if you think it through, we cannot be so relativistic, so lacking in stars to steer by. Even people who are fundamentally committed to be relativistic are defeating themselves in the very process. And yet these foundations of agnosticism, utilitarianism, and relativism are the sandy foundations on which the governing assumptions that affect all of us in our present society. They are the polluted air that we breathe without realizing it. They are a reason why Catholic education must be defended and promoted. We don't have time in this short life to do anything but to fly to the heart of things and not get caught up in these things which ultimately are destructive, where we cannot live a full human life with these illusions. That's why we need to maintain its integrity in the midst of an unhealthy social atmosphere. In the new evangelization, we're being sent to bring light where there is darkness, generous sacrificial love where there's a lot of selfishness. You know, me, myself, and I, the unholy trinity. I always say, you know, that there's no music in hell. Dante makes that clear, the Inferno. Music begins when they start to get to Purgatorio. And the only song in hell is, I did it my way. That kind of thing, you know. But as we're trying to re-evangelize, we're being de-evangelized by a whole society where relativism, does it work? That's all that matters. But to what purpose? And this kind of agnosticism, gee, I don't know. You think this is a music stand? You don't? Well, we all have our own opinion, you know. No, I mean, you can't live that way. Well, we do live that way. This society is crashing. It's sort of the slow motion train wreck. Like Reagan said in one of those debates years ago, are we happier 20 years ago than we were, you know? So Catholic schools are all the more important and need to be solidly founded on faith and reason, with their whole culture infused with the life-giving vision of the gospel. Then we can offer to the world around us what it needs and what we need, a wholesome alternative to those things which are destructive. We light candle after candle. We need to be sure that the ones already lit are not being blown out. And we can contribute to our wider society, as well as ourselves finding the way to the home of the Father when we come to the end of this brief journey through earthly life. And that's an important thought every one of us needs to have, and it should, you know. I think it was Sam Johnson said years ago that if a man knows he's going to be hanged in a couple of weeks, it concentrates the mind wonderfully. Well, it's true. John Fisher, one of my great heroes, who stood up with his friend Thomas More to the tyrant Henry VIII, he kept a skull on his desk. It wasn't much when the government officials came to confiscate his goods. I don't know what they did with it, but he did because he's simply a reminder. Tick, tick, tick. What did you do during your time, your brief passage through this earth? That's the heart of things. It's those questions. I always say when I go to schools, I go to a lot of schools, say, okay, kids, your exams are totally unimportant. Okay? You can say we're in exam week now. So your exams are unimportant. The only thing that matters is the final exam. When the Lord says to you, have you loved the Lord your God with heart and mind and soul? Have you loved your neighbor as yourself? All the rest is commentary. So it's that. So that's what we have to get at in Catholic education. It's a formative experience. And how to do it. Here are a few thoughts. I'll leave out the vowels as in Hebrew and speed things up this way. First of all, just a few points. First of all, we do this in the imitation of Christ the teacher. At the school, the Gregorian University I went to, there's a great statue right beside the coffee bar where Jesus is going like this. Go, teach, make disciples. It's what he says at the end of the Gospel of Matthew. Go, make disciples, go teach. So he's Christ the teacher. Clement of Alexandria wrote a great book about him called Christ the Teacher. Rabbi, they say, master, teacher. That's how he's most addressed. The only one ever calls him Jesus, by the way, is the good thief. I just found that out a few weeks ago. That I read a little commentary. The only one who says, everyone says teacher, teacher. It's just the good thief. on Calvary said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. It's the only time he's ever called Jesus. But he is called teacher. That's his teaching. He's to teach us the way. And he's based, his teaching is, of course, based on the old tradition of the Old Testament as well. Here are a few points from Christ the teacher. First of all, he invited them to come and see. So our education for him is not just getting the message. He could have given them, written it out for them. It was to experience the teacher. And this is still part of the Jewish tradition of teaching. It's to know the teacher, not just to know what the teacher says. That's why Pope Benedict so wisely said, and many others, that our Christian faith is not just to know the New Testament and get the message, memorize the catechism or whatever. It's the encounter with Christ. It is that, who therefore helps us to understand the message. The two go together. So to know the teacher, the disciples lived with him, assimilated his message. And there are some schools where that is done, where the teachers and the students live together. It's a whole experience. Our life is more than words. It's our life will shape Catholic education. The personal lives of all people engaged in Catholic education are teaching all the time. For that matter, the personal lives of everyone in a position of authority of any kind, anyone who is in some way a teacher, we're being looked at all the time, and rightly so. So, just like Charles Borromeo said once to the priest of his diocese, if you tell people to love Jesus and you're not yourself, people will smile and walk away. Think of the importance of that. So it is, think of the teachers. How many teachers do we have here that, in our lives, that we can remember very much of what they said? But the teachers who changed our lives, we remembered who they are. They touched our heart by who they are. And then we remember, because of that, things they said. I remember when my hero as a high school student, Father John Newstead, when he said to me one day, Tom, you should think about becoming a priest. It was not just that he said it, but that he said it. It was the integrity of his life, his daily visits to the sick in hospital, all that, daily, not just once or twice, all the time. It's that made the words have weight. That's important. So whatever level of Catholic education we're at, this really matters. It really matters. And he taught in a community. He gathered people together. It was a sharing. It was the community that shaped and formed. And that's why in a parish community, family community, parish community, diocesan, whatever, we're meant to be together in groups. He sent them out 2 by 2. It's the communion of saints. That's why when people die, we don't... Remember somebody once said that at a funeral, of course, at a funeral, we're mainly... The purpose of a funeral is to help those who are living, not the one who died. It's nonsense. That's not it. The main purpose of a funeral is to pray for the one who died. That, by the way, helps the mourners. But we're doing something because the barrier of death is, it's just another phase of the communion of saints. Like when I was walking into the conclave just a few weeks ago, we were all praying to the saints. They're just as much here as any one of us. They just didn't get picked up on the TV cameras, But boy, they sure helped a lot. As for that matter, did I just give a personal example? Adopt a cardinal. I mean, that was really helpful. We were talking about that a lot. People praying for us. And we were all praying together. We all knew that the whole church was praying for us. We talked about that a lot. I won't tell you what else we could talk about because I sort of swore an oath I wouldn't. But it's really important. That's our Catholic faith. It's not individualistic. It's the communion. And Jesus called the community together, and our education must be that way. In our schools, for example, whether it be university or high school or elementary school, wherever, it is that cohesive community of love and truth that matters. We're called to see the face of Christ in every person all the time. That means teachers with teachers, teachers and students, students with students, all the time. That's why, for example, evils such as bullying are and must be combated in Catholic schools through the rich experience of a community in love in which each person is respected as a child of God. And that's not just words. That we really treat people with reverence. Never mock them. Never be unkind or forget them or walk aside like on the road down with the Good Samaritan, somebody walking by the side. We care for people. We see them. We look them in the face. That's what it should be. That's why superficial legislative initiatives shaped by narrow special interest groups, I don't know what I'm talking about here, and leaving in the lurch most of those who suffer are inadequate. That's not the way to do it. It's the community of love where people treat one another with love. That's the way to do it. That's what we're meant to be. It's this whole vision. Oh, how blind we can be. Our poor society. So brittle. So brittle. So shallow. So vulnerable to forces which are not fruitful and life-giving. And bring such misery under the illusion of bliss and goodness. So, the community is important. And Jesus loved his students, and it showed. And that's sort of what it comes down to in terms of living with integrity. Ultimately, that's what matters. And so, this is the way it is to be in our schools, in all of Catholic education. It's the whole person loved and cared for. And we have a long, because I don't better hurry up, I'll cut out section 4. It's about the tradition of Catholic education. I'll come back to that. No, it's just there are all kinds of ways in which we see this down through history. The Catholic Church has been here, but good grief. Clement of Alexandria, good heavens. The monks, the schools. We created universities. Ex corde ecclesiae. This is one of our inventions. Universities, you know. I'll never forget it. We always have this, they have a line they always use at the university I'm a chancellor of, where they have a sort of a thing about we use Latin and all that because Catholic universities sort of go back to the Catholic Church. Well, you bet they do. All the great people, I think of the religious sisters, like the Notre Dame sisters here at this place, the Loretto sisters that trained me, the St. Joseph sisters, and many other religious orders, communities, the brothers and sisters. You think of people like Father Funken, and think of the Resurrectionists, the Redemptorists, the Jesuits, many other groups. I think of Bishop Ryan, who fought for Catholic education, Bishop Power, the first bishop of my diocese now, lay leadership. These are all centered. This is the heart of it all. I'd say 3 elements of Christian education: community, I've already mentioned that, vision. We have to know. If you know where you're going, you're more likely to get there. So it's kind of good to have the vision. Get it clear. That's why we need to pray. We need to reflect. We need to know our faith. We need to have a vision of the human person. That the person's not a what, but a who. And a who in whom we see the face of Christ. I got a taxi ride this morning, and I was just coming along, and the guy who was there wasn't a Christian. He was asking me about Catholic faith. And he was amazed at that idea, that seeing the face of Christ in others is something that touched his heart. It's what it should do for us too. The vision and the mission. We need a community. We live in community. We have the vision of the Lord that we receive from being immersed, marinated in the gospel of Jesus Christ and in our faith, the teachings of the faith, in our times of prayer. And then that sends us out on a mission. We're sent. This is what Pope Francis is so insisting on. We're not supposed to stick in the sacristy. We're supposed to get out in the streets. He said, a church that turns inward gets sick. You know, I don't, probably somebody may have one of these. Nothing wrong with them, but you know those little things around a candle, people all facing towards the candle? No, flip them around, break the thing, get them looking out, you know. We got to move out. It's only when we work together to serve others that we are alive. And I would just end off with the goals that attain this vision are, first of all, we need to have the knowledge. I've already talked about that. The reason, you know, got to learn how to do that. The school, any school should be second to none because we do it for Jesus, so we should do it well. Know the grammar, know the math, know the science, whatever. We got to have it. We got to have skill too, because education is to help us be skilled. Human relationships and language and all kinds of things. But ultimately, it's holy wisdom. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. We need to do good and let the whole thing be focused on that. The beautiful leads to the true, and the true leads to the good. The beautiful, the true, and they're usually in that order. Mary Ward, the founder of the Loretta Sisters, said once, "Love truth, seek knowledge, not for knowledge itself, but for the end it brings you to, which is God. Then you will be happy and able to profit yourselves and others. Without it, you'll never be fit for anything." There, that's true. So we do it. It's wisdom, holy wisdom. It's to fly to the heart of things, to ask the question, why are we here? Who are we? It's the human question. Who are we as children made in the image and likeness of God? Each one of us in which we see the face of Christ. That's to fly to the heart of things. And all of the academic and all the other things are rich insofar as we do that. That's why the only way, I trust John Henry Newman for many reasons, because he's a brilliant man, great guy, you learn a lot, read a lot, so on. But he also got out there and heard confessions and helped people. It was all one piece. He wasn't disintegrated. It's that wholeness, head, heart, and hands. It's all got to be together. It's three facets of one diamond. Head, heart, and hands. It's all got to be there. To fly to the heart of things. That's our mission. And if we do that, then we will be fulfilling the purpose of Catholic education. And for all the struggles which we will face, and we do face, sometimes external, but I'm finding basically, perfectly honest, that in my experience of Catholic education, a lot of our problems come from within. We're fighting one another, you know. This is not acceptable. Let strife among us be unknown. Let all contention cease. Be Christ the glory that we seek. Be ours his holy peace. We can't have that. We need to have a clear vision of the Lord and of the mission of Catholic education and not be messing around with other things. And if we do, if we are rooted in that, in the spirit of the great people who have gone before us, not only the great saints and of course the imitation of our Lord, but of the people who founded this university and the Catholic education system in our province and beyond, but I think of our own province. The people who slaved for it, who fought for it, before we got somewhat corrupted in 1984 by full funding, I'm afraid, perhaps lost the point of it all. Not that it's necessarily a consequence, but I wonder. We got to get to the heart of it all. We got to fly to the heart of things. And if we do, then we need not fear. One of my great heroes is Edmund Campion. And you should read the thing called Campion's Brag. It's the thing he sent off to Queen Elizabeth I, the Tudor tyrant, the daughter of the other Tudor tyrant. It sort of goes Tudor tyrant, toxic Tudor tyrant. No. Anyway, but he has this great thing where he talks about coming into England to face persecution, you know, the whole thing. But he says at the end, the expense is reckoned, the enterprise has begun. It is of God, it cannot be withstood. So the faith was planted, so shall it be restored. So that's the wild abandon and joy with which we approach our whole life and the new evangelization in our life as servants of our Lord. And that's got to be at the heart of Catholic education. So we pray for it. We pray for all engaged in it. And I'll just end off with a prayer for holy wisdom, which is a sort of a famous hymn, but I think it's that. To fly to the heart of things means to see the wisdom that treats people as children of God and not as objects to be manipulated. To see head, heart, and hands together. Knowledge and skill, but this is holy wisdom. This is the heart of things. Lord of all power, I give you my will. In joyful obedience, your tasks to fulfill. Your bondage is freedom, your service is song. And held in your keeping, my weakness is strong. Lord of all wisdom, I give you my mind. Rich truth that surpasses man's knowledge to find. What eye has not seen and what ear has not heard is taught by your Spirit and shines from your word. Lord of all being, I give you my all. If e'er I disown you, I stumble and fall. But sworn in glad service, your word I obey. I walk in your freedom to the end of the way. Okay. I think I went on a bit, so sorry about that. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, God bless. Thank you.
Cardinal Collins has agreed to take questions. So we have microphones, one on each side of the hall. So if you would like to make a comment or ask a question, then please would you proceed to one of those microphones. And I will ask you to be concise and to the point so we can get in as many questions and comments as possible. Thank you.
Just got a new hearing aid too, so I might be able to hear you.
Father, Bishop, over here.
Oh, over here, okay, fine.
Cardinal Collins,
Yes.
could you comment on your experience of the conclave and bringing together a new leader for our church from your educational and personal experience?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that.
Sure. Well, it was an awesome experience, as I've said so many times. It was a very prayerful experience. It had nothing to do with what was in the media. It was just totally, it was fun watching all that stuff. You know, the real thing inside was we were very conscious of the need to pray for the Lord to guide us. And I think Pope Benedict was just so, he's very frail. He's 86, and he's been going at a pace that people usually tires people out in their 30s. So he's exhausted, as he said. So he needed, and we need a fresh start in that way. And that's, I think Pope Benedict was very wise in seeing that. He's given us teachings that will last us for generations, for the future. And so what we did, we got together, and the conclave, we were seeking who is it that should shepherd God's people, who would be the Bishop of Rome, be the Vicar of Christ on earth. And it all comes down to, when you stand in front of the Michelangelo's Last Judgment, you hold up like this, you hold up the ballot, and you say out loud in Latin, but it's there, everyone knows what it says, I testify before Jesus Christ who will judge me. Ooh, look down, that the one I'm voting for is the one I truly believe should be elected. Then you put it in, and everyone holds it up. I testify before Jesus Christ who will judge me. What we wanted was, everyone had different views, and I was amazed. Like when I'm a baby cardinal, Cardinalino. I'm a little baby cardinal, but I was. The first week, there are two phases of the conclave. The first week is the pre-conclave, where you have, we go to those meetings, see us going across the square and everything. Those were mind-numbing. Every cardinal spoke for 5 minutes and a bit more. But they were very interesting because you could see what were the needs of the church around the world. And you learn an awful lot. And I realized, I was sitting there, looking around this ring, sort of big kind of an amphitheater thing. There's a lot of experience in this room. And some of the best lines came out, best insights came for the 95-year-old cardinals and things like that, So because everyone can contribute, but only those under 80 can vote, which is probably a good balance, probably a good mix. So I just learned a lot. And what do we need now for the leadership? And what happens basically, I think, in the sense of what you're looking at, that just as in every parish and every diocese, no one human being can be what the office requires totally. So you can't do it in one person, you do it sequentially. So, that's why you have, we have a great teacher, we have now a great sort of hands-on pastor kind of guy, and we have a person who gives us the insight for the future, we have a person who does that kind of immediate pastoral care for the present. So you need to, they all have the fundamental faith, they're all, I remember when I just came out of the dinner with the Holy Father just after they got elected, and I got in touch with my assistant who was there. He said, come to, we want to talk to you on CTV up. So I go up there and swaying, the winds howling and all that. So it was a gift. And then I came down and there was a reporter from a major network, which will remain nameless, but whose first letter and last letter are the same, and there's one in the middle that's sort of... and whose headquarters, I've never said this in public, whose headquarters in Toronto on Front Street has the cross of Christ all over it. Red. But anyway, look, just watch, just go there, watch. Anyway, but basically said, why is it that is the Catholic Church so desperate that they elected a left-wing Jesuit South American liberation theologian to be Pope? And I said, hey, I don't think you know what you're talking about. So I mean, there are a lot of speculations of things, but Pope Francis, I think he provides a different perspective. Pope Benedict different from Pope John Paul. Extrovert Pope John Paul, introvert Pope Benedict. you know, kind of more the kind of the pastoral governance one with Pope Francis and the next popes and the next down, each pope through generations. We just keep changing, turning the diamond in the way we pray the Lord to help us to know which particular thing at the moment, what exactly does the church need at the moment. And that we have the prayers of God's people to help us in that.
Mm-hmm. Your Eminence,
yes.
I just wanted to say thank you for three things. You mentioned three heroes of mine: John Henry Newman, Edmund Campion, and St. John Fisher, which are not often talked about. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Secondly, I was 32. I was exactly 30 when the Second Vatican Council was called.
Mm-hmm.
So I lived through. I was formed in the pre-Vatican Church, and I respect it. And I just like to say, for those who have lived through that, we don't want to go back there. But
Yeah.
that's an aside. I worked in the Diocese of Sault Ste. Marie with Bishop Alexander Carter for many years in a variety of positions, eventually ordained to the diaconate. And I ran with my wife a Catholic center and also was academic director of the diaconate program there. So my question is around the topic of adult education outside of the institutions.
Right, yes.
It was very active in the 70s and 80s, and then all the Catholic centers in Sault Ste. Marie are closed. I'm not sure what happened to the office of the CCCB, but it was certainly downsized by quite a bit. So my question is, will we see a reemergence of the necessity for Catholic education, of adult education, and sort of a move away from this, what I call the rather clammy hand of doctrinal orthodoxy, which has been somewhat heavy in the last few years?
I don't think I'd agree with you on a lot of points, but I probably agree with you on some.
Well, that's normal in academic circles.
True, I guess. No, I think that we need to have places like this, but and also these places such as this formal academic institutions also are engaged in kind of a broader outreach beyond degrees and things like that. I can't speak for, I know my own diocese of Toronto. We have, like St. Michael's College, we have St. Augustine Seminary, Regis, and the places like that, which give the more formal thing. We also have the Institute of Catholic Education in St. Augustine's, which is doing more what you're talking about, adult education. We also have the Faith Formation Office of the diocese, which is involved very much in the very things you're talking about. I think that we can't just simply have a few people with MDivs and things like that. We've got to spread the faith. And I think that's really the way it should be. We need to evangelize the society. We've got to reach out. And I think that means doing that. And it means making use of the great tradition. If we're disconnected, the branches and twigs get lonely if they're disconnected from the roots. So I think that there's a continuity. I think the point that Pope Benedict very often made about the hermeneutic, or the kind of the lens of rupture and the lens of continuity, I agree with him that the lens of continuity is basically good. And I think that if you look in the footnotes of Vatican II, you find mostly the Council of Trent and Vatican I and Pius XII and things like that. So,
I agree.
You know, there's a continuity there. So no, I think we need to do more of that, though. I agree, not just simply academic institutions, and those that are need to spread
Thank you.
the word.
Thank you for coming to speak with us. My question is that because education of the whole person, it starts in school, but the formation of the whole person does not end in school.
Yeah.
What is the number one thing of many that Catholic schools can do to kind of instill that yearn to learn for your entire life?
Yeah. Well, that's important. I think if we have a sense that it's simply, you know, they say, what is it, not a Catholic educator, but it was, I'm blank, I can't even, anyway, somebody said that education is not filling a bucket, but lighting a fire. We got to have that sense, you know, that there's that hunger, that constant desire. That's why I think things such as having every diocese have available opportunities for doing this is very important. I think also one of the things we need to have is a very profound sense of a need to help and encourage families. I mean, family, after all, schools are, especially elementary and other, but all schools really, are simply delegated by the family to do the work. They are not delegated by the government. They're delegated by the family, by the parents, and by the family. So I think the more we strengthen the family, help people within marriage, help people prepare for marriage, help people appreciate the theology of the body, the fullness of vision of that, to that degree we will have a healthy society. To the degree to which we're caught up in some of the unwholesome things I mentioned, we won't. So I think that's strengthening and helping marriages that are struggling, helping people in every way like that. That's also because the house of wisdom in the ancient Old Testament was partly the court, but mostly it was the family. So I think more we can do with that would help. And that also ties into the previous point about the education occurring, within that. Also, I think another thing that is very good and bad, but inherently a good development, is social media, things like that. It's exciting. It's also evil, but it's exciting. If you look at webs and things, like I always begin the morning, I've been praying the office on a electrical. I haven't had a batteryless briefly for a while, but you pray. You can use computers for all kinds of things, but you can also get a lot of understanding and knowledge, continue it actively, and engage in an interactive way through blogs and things like that. I would recommend a thing called New Advent and Big Pulpit. New Advent, Big Pulpit. These are two scans. They're like digests that you can kind of lead in. The trouble is you go down into the comments to blogs, and you see evil manifest. Evil. I mean, you see evil. I mean, you just can't believe that. Like, some blogs are so vicious. It's just cruel. And you see things too. For example, the computers can be used as recently and frequently we see for bullying and for making life miserable. There's all kinds of potential for evil. However, there's also potential for good. So we need to occupy the territory with good. So I think that's another way we can go beyond the schools.
Thank you. Hi.
Yes.
Hello.
Sure. You better pull it down there.
Hi, Father. So thank you for coming. I guess. Oh, hello.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry. So I guess just for the practicing and possibly new teachers in the room,
right.
Do you have any tips, I guess, about teaching the more abstract theologies of our faith to students, especially young students like elementary, secondary, and especially to students who are in Catholic schools who don't have that Catholic background, especially with Easter that just came by, like the resurrection of Christ or transubstantiation and, things like that.
These are difficult.
Yeah. And teaching it in a way where it's not just, like you said, about teaching the head, but also making it reach their heart and their hands as well.
I think you can learn from like an example of that. If you want a teaching lesson, like you're sitting in a classroom watching a master teacher do it, I would say you can get a hold of this somewhere. I don't know, but you can hunt it down. Right at the end of the Synod on the Eucharist, Pope Benedict gathered together all the kids who just made their first communion in Rome or Italy, or so thousands of them in the square. And he sat there, and about 12 of them sat around the front, and then there are thousands all around. And it was most instructive to see, because there's obviously Pope Benedict immensely learned, and all that. But a little kid came up and said, Pope, I just made my first confession, but do I have to keep doing that? And so the Pope said, well, he said, and this is amazing, I never thought the Pope Benedict would talk this way. He said, well, you clean your room? Oh yeah, my mom and dad want me to make me clean my room. Do you just do it once? No, it gets dirty. Well, you get dirty again, so you got to keep cleaning it. So that's why it's good to go to confession. Keep going to confession, because we need it all the time. Oh, and what about faith? I want to believe. People tell me I'm supposed to believe about these things, but I can't see Jesus, and I can't see. Well, see these lights here, and it was getting dark. Can you see the electricity? Well, no, I can see that. Well, that's what sort of faith is like. God's like that. He's there. He makes things, but he doesn't. But the best one of all was this little boy said, Holy Father, I want to go to Mass, but my mom and dad won't take me. What should I do? Can you imagine the parents said, you said what to the Pope? So, but he said, well, you gotta you know, you got to obey your mom and dad, and you just speak, you know, always follow your mom and dad. But, you know, maybe you can help them want to go to Mass, and just ask them, to encourage them to try to do that. And, you know, so, I mean, he was just talking and not talking down to them, but just talking plain and simple. And I think that's that's sort of the most profound faith can be, it's not for rocket scientists. You know, it's not complicated. It's difficult because it's inherently profound, but it's not falsely complex, which is harder to teach. You know, it is simple. So that's like, and I don't suggest this using maybe the shamrock, though I'm Cardinal Priest of St. Patrick's, you know, but I don't suggest using the shamrock perhaps, although it was a good effort. It's got a lot you can learn there, you know, because in the famous movie Nuns on the Run, 3 gangsters were caught up in a convent rescue, and they end up in teaching a class, a religion class like this, and the only thing he remembers is the shamrock, and so he says, well, that means that God is small and green and divided in 3 parts. So you've got to watch the imagery. But, so all the images are a little bit, you've got to be careful a bit about using images. Like the beanbag theory of grace, for example, that when we're like beanbags, and we commit a sin, it's a rip, and sort of the grace pours out, the beans pour out, and then when you go to confession, it sews up, but you've got to, that's probably not the best, you know, you can, the other thing is that, you know, the good shepherd ultimately either eats the sheep or fleeces them, but we don't, oh, I ruined the perfect image for you, but so every image always, you can go too far, you know, so you got to sort of watch where you go. But I think stories like that, and just telling stories, can do it. But we can't just say that. We have to go deeper, though. And I think that we have to, first of all, teachers have to get deeply aware of the faith. You can't explain something simply unless you know it profoundly. That's the heart of, I think, of teaching. You can't. And I remember being in a classroom with a teacher who the text was just 2 areas that the teacher had not gone into. So they skipped the text completely and just told stories which didn't have anything to do with Jesus at all. So that was a bit of a difficulty. I think we have to get ourselves, that's where these other things were mentioned a few times ago, these, like really get a profound, is somebody like Pope Benedict, who has really profound knowledge, can really explain it simply. I think you'll find that's true. Like someone like Bishop Sheen can teach us a lot. It was a bit before your time, but I mean, Bishop Sheen, you can get his stuff is on video. He could explain the most profound things in simple ways, but first you have to go deep. There's a guy called Emanuel Lasker who was a great master of chess. And in Lasker's Manual of Chess, he has a wonderful line. It's very complex about the mysteries of chess. But he says, I will explain to you things which are both simple and marvelous. And I think that's maybe the way you need to do it. But it takes a full immersion in that.
Cardinal, our Catholic system of education is dying, both from inside and outside.
Maybe.
Lots of people say it that way.
I know. Maybe not. Yes, true. Okay.
We need to do something about it. Now, you mentioned the family as the basic unit.
Yes.
Some people say, let it die.
Let what die?
Let the Catholic education system die. And let's start another one. Now, I know it's a shame to lose the funding that the government gives to us, or we give to our Catholic systems through our taxation. But at least then they won't be able to dictate to us. We have to teach about abortion. You mentioned the family as the unit. And a good friend of mine was a chaplain in Oakland, and he was on the admissions committee. And he said there were arm's length of lists of families wanting to get into their school, and he had to turn a lot away because there just wasn't the room. And maybe that's something we need to think about, although I hate to see it go that way. But at least people that want to go to a Catholic system, want their children to be educated in a Catholic system. We're accepting kids of other religions now who don't really care what they learn the Our Father are into our schools.
That's a system in most countries, you know. Very few countries have Catholic education system with Catholic students, you know.
So do we hang on to it, or do we start again?
Well, I don't know whether it's just one or the other. I think we have to be sure it is what it's meant to be. And often it isn't, believe me. We all have our stories. You can tell yours, I can tell mine, are horror stories. And I'm getting a lot of them lately, you know. And one makes you say, well, what the heck, you know, just pack it in. And at times, a thought has crossed my mind. But on other occasions, you think of the great goodness that is there, because we can all anecdotally talk about some problem in Catholic education. But I am going on the road all the time seeing Catholic schools. I'm seeing these the student trustees we got are spectacular, and we couldn't have that. The St. Michael's Choir School, just an example, just one example, just next to where I live. It's got, I mean, it too has its problems. All schools have their problems. I mean, it's not perfect, but the amount, I just came back from a pilgrimage they had to Rome on their 75th anniversary. And I think, oh, those lucky Americans. They don't have government funding. They can do what they want. Not true. Not true at all. And they must have perfect schools. They're smaller. They can have a more elite teaching staff. They don't have to. Not true at all. I remember a bishop told me once, he came to a diocese and the teachers were about to go on strike. Was it because of their poor pay? Because they weren't getting very good pay? That would be a good reason. No, because they were being asked to go to Mass on Sunday. And so if you look over the field, over to the grass, the green grass, the other side of the fence, I think we just have to forget that option. Private schools, well, they're good. I mean, I have nothing, I visit private schools too. I'm always see them, and they're fine. But St. Peter's has got a big colonnade. It's for a crowd. It's reaching out. It's not, we are not any, I mean, that's good. They're good. I have nothing against private Catholic schools, and I support them 100%. But we can't simply fish with a line. We've got to fish with a net. And we have a responsibility to do that. Now, our particular funding system is odd, unusual, historically sanctioned. Partly, I thought, was because of things of the 1840s. It was actually because the British wanted to keep the Irish loyal and the Scottish Glengarry Highlanders loyal under Macdonnell, because the Americans were about to attack right after the War of 1812. That contributed somewhat to the funding decisions they were making. And their zeal for funding got less and less as the American threat subsided. However, be that as it may, we do have a system which is extraordinary in many good ways. But how do you be sure that 40,000 Catholic teachers are all as fervent as they should be? Or I don't know how many Catholic trustees. We've got 26 boards. And how can we be sure they're the level? Well, that's our mission. That's the thing. Internal problems are our problems. And I must say, I've sometimes found in trying to fight the good fight recently that we get sort of, this is all being videotaped, isn't it? Can I talk? No, but I sometimes find that our troubles come from within. That sometimes, like, for example, I could make a statement on something and you get clipped from our own people. And we have to behave carefully in that and keep the family together, but be sure you talk bluntly in private to the family members. But we have all these problems, of course. But I think that we have something extraordinary in the present Catholic system we have. With all of its flaws, we can spend forever. We have wonderful schools. We have opportunities which are extraordinary. And we pay for this too. This isn't a gift. We're taxpayers. And look at the extraordinary gift that our Catholic schools, look at where they are. Look at how they contribute to society. We do not need to feel guilty about that or cringe or beg or whatever. These are extraordinary gifts to the whole of society. And there's much that is wonderful within them. And there are opportunities. We have threats recently, we have problems recently from external forces. But most of our problems, I found, have been internal. That's our family problem. In terms of all factors, whether it be teachers, priests, bishops, trustees, parents, we got to get our own act together, and then we won't have so much of a worry about the external forces that surround us. And we got to get it together, I'd say, rather quickly. But then we always have to. But I mean, we have to do that. And that's why the stuff I was talking about this earlier, this is what I really believe, and I think we need to be attentive to it, But I don't think the solution of simply saying, well, it's all, let's just, you can't fix something that doesn't exist. guess it comes down to that. This isn't perfect, but it's got a lot of good, and we need to just diligently, all of us, work at being sure it is what it's meant to be. And I think we have a right to do that, constitutionally, obviously, but that's not going to cut any ice with anyone. But we have to do it because of the sheer goodness of what it can be and what it is so often. There's an awful lot of good out there. If you think of, I think of what, 600 and some thousand, 50,000 or something Catholic students in a Catholic school system, all the good they experience. We could perhaps have 600 school in an elite school somewhere, or maybe 6,000 if that, not that much, 2,000 maybe. But we're meant to go beyond that. And I think we should do that, even if we didn't have the funding that we happen to have at the moment. I mentioned a little bit later that I think we fell asleep in 1984 a bit, and we let it slip. We were not attentive. We didn't keep our eye on the ball, I think. There are a lot of things we have to fix and work on. I can give you a list of them, but I think we all know what they are. But we better get cracking on that. And not just the bishops or the trustees or the teachers, but all of us together. And we won't ever fix anything perfectly. And as I say, even this American system where, you know, the church controls it, believe me, it's not perfect either. I tell you, I talk to my American brother bishops there. We've all got problems. And you mentioned about non-Catholic students there. Often they put us to shame. They put us to shame. You know, especially, I mean, good heavens, they're an example for us. You know, the fervent Protestant students. Let's not, you know, let's imitate, let's learn from that, you know, let's get cracking on that. And as I mentioned, like in India, China, like in Hong Kong, Africa, many places and around the world, rarely do you find Catholic students in a Catholic school. I mean, at least not rarely do you find them. Most of the students are, in fact, of other religions. It's part of the mission. You know, it's part of the mission. But also, we don't want to have, just sort of like, it's an old example I always find, you know, we are not a tight little sect of the saved. If we are that, we're not the Catholic Church. We are the Catholic Church. If you seek a perfect church, when you find it, join it. On that day, it will cease to be a perfect church. You know? So, you know? So it's messy. It's messy. Believe me, it's messy. When I'm dealing with this faith thing, we've got, you know, the union, the trustees, the bishop, the whole, you know, I tell you. But we've got to, I'd say, let's get cracking on this. Let's be sure, but we can't, and we do have to, lately, just most recently, we've had one issue, really, well, a few issues in this province where there has, in fact, been an external challenge to our Catholic faith. And that's, however, it's been supported internally sometimes, and that's the problem. That's the problem we need to face. But we do not in our Catholic schools do anything. We must not do anything that is against our Catholic faith. And that's as simple as that. Okay, over here. Mm-hmm.
Your Eminence, thank you. I've really enjoyed your lecture this evening and your emotional sincerity. Okay. I graduated in 1983, just before the funding formula changed. And I stood to ask this question before that gentleman asked his question. So I risk asking you to repeat yourself a little bit, but I'll be more precise in my question. Is there a funding formula change that you envision that would enable you to have sufficient influence on our Catholic education system in Ontario to help fix it? Mm-hmm. Do you see that as a mechanism?
Well, I don't know. We could. It would be very hard to change the funding formula in a way that would sort of tune it up to what we would prefer, let's say, and deal with the problems that we may have. I think the problems we face are not because of the funding formula. The problems we face are because of our own internal inadequacies as a community. The funding formula may, in fact, have exacerbated just simply what's already there. Some bishops are rather happy when they have a partial funding of their schools because they still have some, you know, kind of connectedness. That's true. There's something to be said for that, but I don't think we can kind of dial back in a way that will get just the right mix, let's say. I'm not sure that will work. I do think we just have to be attentive. We have to get our eye back on the ball. And I don't see, I think the problem, the difficulty is, the challenge and the good thing is that we surpass government standards and everything pretty well. You know, we surpass them. So we're not going against the government in the sense of all the legitimate standards the government has, obviously. Whether it's caring for people, being kind to people, being, obviously, heaven knows, look around, you know. Oh, we have our faults. You can't find a perfect Catholic school either. You find things like bullying and all that, and I'm afraid everywhere. But we are doing at least as much and usually more. So we're fine in that we're trying. What we need to do, I think, is to be sure that all of our teachers, that we have ways of helping our teachers to be fervent in the faith, that our trustees are helped in the governance, that they be deep, and there are all kinds of things working on this. We just have to be sure they are effective. That all the structure within the school system, the boards, and all the different groups, and that's what I know I and my fellow bishops are trying to keep at that. We don't have a case really where we sort of say teach the Catholic faith and the government, except one problematic area we've dealt with recently. It comes close to that, but not if we do it the right way. For example, respecting difference is a way of doing it the right way. Our problems, I think, usually come from within. And that's our problem to fix. We can't blame the government, or we can't blame the society or something. We better get working on that at the level. And if we have difficulties in trustee, like at school boards, run for office, you know. There we are. If we have difficulty in, let's say, the union, let's say, if I have a teacher who has concerns, let's say, about policy here or there, run for office. I mean, get in there. Become a, unit president. Become a, if we all of us need to be engaged at everything. And if in terms of the relationship with the parish and the school, well, let's get the bishops and the priests more engaged, and we. Or if this, all the areas, it's our ball to drop, our ball to pick up. And we better get cracking on it. We can't just be sort of blaming things. And I don't think there's a simple solution either. I remember once somebody was pulling them, I was in Alberta, a similar funding system there, pulling their kids out of the school. They want to do homeschooling, which again, I have nothing against. It's a legitimate form of doing it. And I said, but look, we're trying to do all this. You're withdrawing all the fervent Catholic students from the Catholic school. And he said, well, Bishop, you work in fixing the Catholic school, but my kid's going to be 25 before you'd fix it, if at least, Well, okay, but I mean, we all have to work on this. And I think that's just as necessary. Yes?
Cardinal, I want to thank you for what you're saying in defense of the school system today.
Yeah.
And I want to support what you're saying about the division within. We talked earlier about having met earlier through OCSTA, the Trustee Association. Right. Our schools today are good Catholic schools, and they are doing good work. The problem, and I'd like you to comment on, is first of all, there's two things. One is the division within. You've talked a lot about the need to overcome that.
Yes.
We've talked about that for years. The problem is how. Yeah. At one point, the center for that was our parishes. Our parishes are no longer able to do that because many people are not a part of those parishes. The school system isn't able to do it because, again, it is dealing with children, but it isn't necessarily the center. These lectures, the university is playing its role, but we need to figure out a way to make that happen. The other thing that I would like you to comment on, if you would, is that many of the criticisms from within is that people are looking for a school system that existed in 1960. Yeah. This is 2013, and I'm not sure that we've defined, number one, what it means to be a Catholic in 2013, let alone what it means to be an effective system of education within 2013. So I don't know if you can comment on those, but I'd like.
Those you're dealing with several very profound issues that need to be looked at. I think really it comes down to the last point you were making is maybe the crucial one that ties in the rest of what you're saying in terms of what can we do. The reality is we're facing a cultural issues of the whole society. It's the air we breathe, it's the sea in which we swim, and it's somewhat polluted. Not totally, it's not all. God made the world, He loves the world, it's fundamentally so much good, But there are a lot of issues that are problems. And a lot of it goes back to, you read a book by Mary Eberhart called Adam and Eve After the Pill. Read that book and you'll get a lot of insight. I think a lot comes down to that. Adam and Eve After, I think it's Adam and Eve After the Pill by Mary Eberhart, I think is her name. Mary Eberhart. Our social, we have all kinds of social structures that are difficult. And even as you say Catholic faith, we have people, there's a tremendous individualism, a tremendous stuff like that. And that's part of the mission that I would have as a bishop, to proclaim the faith in ways, and Pope Francis is doing it in different ways than Pope Benedict from Pope John Paul. But I think a lot of those issues, they come down to things like theology of the body, they come down to a lot of issues like that, are more fundamental than education, than the Catholic education system. And so if you have people who've grown up in this, affected by these things throughout their life, it's very hard to have that person then, flourish, shape a Catholic school system that's what it should be. It's not a matter of going back to 1960, I don't think. That's another time it's gone. But I think it is valuing what is eternal. The things that change are not central. The things that are, we need to get back, we need to get away from the rim and into the center. And that means getting more deep into our knowledge of the faith, or reading the scriptures, things like that, and our knowledge particularly of the wholeness of our faith. I think if we all do that, and things like the universities and the adult education stuff will help in that. We got to do this on a broad base. We can't just there's no simple magic bullet that will do it. Then I think our whole community can be stronger, and only out of that will we get a real solution to the struggles we have with Catholic education. It's a lot of division within the church itself about various issues, and that makes it very hard. Issues of morality, issues of the nature of the family. Society is shifting that way. But we are not meant to be, the symbol at the top of our churches is a cross. It's not a weather vane. And so we're countercultural. Catholic education, like the Catholic Church, is more countercultural than it was in Elizabeth's England at the time of Edmund Campion. And I think a lot of our people, though, I mean, we've been de-evangelized by a society which there are a lot of unhealthy things, and it hasn't made everyone all very happy, has it? There's a lot of stuff that's going on in our society that is very problematic.
My question is, how can we make this formation in the knowledge of the faith more practical in the schools? In the first place, how can we help our teachers to grow more in the knowledge of the faith? And also, can you envision in the near future about helping to improve the textbooks used in our Catholic schools to make it more solid in content-wise? Thank you.
Okay, I think the first question, again, is a very profound and difficult one, for which I can't give an answer in a short time, in terms of how do we help the teachers to be, and also I'd say the trustees and the administrators and everyone, the priests and so on, to be better at this. I think it's a broad front. We've got to just be sure we encourage people. We have retreats, we have study days, we help them, we do the screening, we help the whole bit. So it's a broad thing. I think it's hard to, we just keep working at it in all those different ways. And people are trying. There's efforts here and there that need to be encouraged and made. Best practices have to be made known and so on. We need to pray for Catholic education too. I mean, all the same with all the Lord said about vocations, pray to the Lord of the harvest. We need to pray as well for Catholic education, that it be what it should be. The second point about texts and things is a good point. We have a big religion text with all different ones, but the Canadian one is very complex and very beautiful, but sometimes perhaps too complex to be effective. That's the difficulty I think we faced. It's just, this is just anecdotal, so don't put too much weight on it, but somebody, a teacher, I walked in the room, they were doing a very complex and theoretically perfect religion program, but it was too complex for them. So they just skipped it and went on to other stuff, which wasn't the faith. So if something has to be simple, it's just like the, what was it, there's some tank, the Russians, and I'm not base everything upon artillery, but there was one army had a tank that was brilliant. It could do everything. It could spin around, could make a good cup of coffee, do all these things, except that it broke down if there was dirt. But it could do great things if that wasn't the problem. Whereas the Russian army in World War II had all these rather primitive tanks, but they worked poorly, but a lot of them worked well, you know. So I think we got to, you know, sometimes high tech is not, we got to just sort of get something pretty basic that works. And, you know, that's all I ask, get a system that works. No. But I mean, it's simple to say, but we have to look at, sometimes we can get too sophisticated. And I think sometimes in our religious education, we become too sophisticated to the point where it won't work. And so what's the point of that? You know, it just doesn't work. So we need to get back to more simple things like, do you clean under your bed? Yes. Do you do it more than once? Yes. Well, let's go to confession more than once. I think that's something like that. Now, we're maybe... Okay. Yes.
Thank you. Question is, I've heard about from the recent popes the two things, the Year of Faith, of course, that we're in now, and the new evangelization.
Yes.
And I'm in a group called Couples for Christ, which, which invites people in to renew family life and such. And I've also taken a course through a ministry called the Mission of Redeemer Ministries, which is based near Ottawa, which trains people to evangelize, basically.
Okay, good.
Do you see any other specific things, manifestations of things coming from the Year of Faith and the new evangelization, or is it just a nice slogan?
Well, it is to a large degree a nice and useless slogan that does no good. You know, which is, that's why I always worry. We new evangelization, you know, we use it all, like lectio divina, things like that, and that's the danger, is that it become just the latest buzzword, you know. So we got to go deep, and the things like Couples for Christ is a way of doing that. It's a very good move. Another group, the Jesus Youth, which comes from India, and I was just talking to the head of the Catholic Student Trustees, has been very much formed and shaped by Jesus Youth. I mean, this is just one group, but it's extraordinary. They have 10-day formation sessions, retreats, training in catechesis and stuff. No wonder this guy's so, I mean, it's just wonderful. We have where there is a training in theology of the body, and you can get very, like, if you read Pope John Paul on that, you need, you know, no decaf when you're reading that. It's, you know, heavy stuff. It's very deep but very hard to go through. We need popularizations of it. And, you know, solid gold, but too compact for popular. So you can get things with that. So theology of the body taught in a popularized way is excellent. It is an antidote to some of the toxic stuff we've got in our society. Movements like Couples for Christ, I'd say Jesus Youth, other groups, there are many different groups, Community Liberation, many groups like that. They help, as long as they don't become little isolated groups. You always have to keep connected into your parish, because you don't want to have, we don't want to have the Catholic Church to be like salad dressing, you know, where it sort of breaks into globules. And, you know, we want to keep them stirred, to keep them together. So I think things like that, there's a lot of good going on. I mean, people say, oh my gosh, look at the problems you think of. I tell you, some of the last couple of years I've been thinking a few of them. But it's exciting, it's great stuff. You know, you know, I feel like Edmund Campion, you know, handing out, you know, the enterprise has begun. It is of God, it cannot fail. You know, we trust in the Lord. We're not going to fix this stuff ourselves. It's overwhelming, and so we rejoice and move on. You know, so I think, and groups like Couples for Christ and other groups are great. And Catholic education, for all its you know, flaws, it's great. But we need to fight for it. We need to know it. We can't have something that is not what it should be. So where it isn't, we got to. It's not me that's going to do it, or it's anyone else. It's, remember, when you point the finger at someone else, you got 3 of them pointing back at yourself. So we've got to. You do it. You do it. No, we've got to do it ourselves. Okay. Okay. Okay, great.
I'd now like to ask Larry Clifford, the director of the Waterloo Catholic District School Board, to come forward and formally thank Cardinal Collins on our behalf.
Thank you, Christina. It's my pleasure on behalf of our friends at St. Jerome's University, my colleagues in the school board, trustees that I work with in the school board, and the friends and supporters of Your Eminence who are here tonight, to thank you for your time and talents. His Eminence shared with me that he recently returned from the conclave, which is quite a jet flight over and back, and he was just over and back again this week. And your efforts and your talents that you displayed here tonight, I found not only to be inspirational, genuine, and motivating, wrapped in an appropriate sense of humor that allows us to have the courage and conviction to move forward. And for that, on behalf of the group, I thank you. I resonate to the examples that you use about being in the classrooms. And I was in a classroom this week in Cambridge, and it was a grade 5 classroom. And I had the opportunity to speak with the children, and I let them know that I was seeing Cardinal Collins this week. And there was a hush across the classroom. And I said, does anybody know who he is? And this one boy put up his hand. And he had a Toronto Maple Leaf uniform on. And he said, I know who he is, and he's a Leaf fan. And I said, that's great. I said, if you had one question, what would it be for him? And he thought for a moment, and he said, would he pray for the Leafs to make the playoffs? So tonight I shared that with Cardinal Collins at the table, and Cardinal Collins said to me, you know, Larry, it's good to know that hope, faith, and charity are still in the schools. We shared at our table tonight as well that His Eminence had the opportunity to speak with Pope Francis, and in a very short exchange, Pope Francis asked the Cardinal to pray for him. And as we, supporters of the Catholic education system, that is not perfect, I grant you that, continue to use our hearts, our heads, and our hands to promote, preserve, and protect Catholic education, we ask that you continue to pray for us, and we will continue to pray for you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the evening.
Thank you, Larry. A couple more pieces of business before we wrap up this evening. First of all, I want to thank the Waterloo Catholic District School Board very much for its ongoing support of this lecture. We're so grateful for your commitment to helping to provide events such as tonight's lecture. I want to remind you that you can sign up in the foyer if you want to receive the latest information about our lecture series and get reminder emails about upcoming speakers. Every year, St. Jerome's University is pleased to present a provocative program of speakers to our community. And we are able to do this at no charge, thanks to the generosity of partners and supporters. So if you would like to support the lectures, there are donation envelopes, some of them here in the room, and then there are some also on the table in the foyer. And thank you so much to all of you who have given so generously. And when you go down to the foyer and all the way down the hall, there are a number of wonderfully fairly traded products available for sale there by our Social Justice Committee. We have Wordsworth books also in the foyer, and they have copies of Cardinal Collins' book, Cornerstones of Faith, Reconciliation, Eucharist, and Stewardship, published last year by Novalis. And Cardinal Collins is quite open and happy to sign any of those books for you, and he will be also in the foyer ready to do that. Finally, our next lecture, and it's actually the last lecture in this year's series, will take place next week on Thursday evening, April the 18th. This will be the 11th annual John Sweeney Lecture in Current Issues in Healthcare. The title of it is It's Your Choice, a panel discussion on the significance of posting emergency department wait times. Panelists will be Dr. Bob Wickett, who is the Chief of Emergency Medicine at both St. Mary's and Grand River Hospitals, Don Shilton, the President of St. Mary's Hospital, and Bruce Lochner, CEO of the Waterloo-Wellington Local Health Integration Network. The event takes place at Heasley Hall at St. Mary's General Hospital, and it begins with refreshments at 7 p.m. and the panel at 7:30 p.m. Now, the hospital has made it clear to us their space is limited, so they do want us to RSVP. So on the table in the foyer, there is information there about the phone number you can call or the email that you can send your RSVP to. So they're ready to receive that. So thank you very much to all of you for coming tonight. We're grateful that the weather moved through soon enough today that we could all be here. Please have a very safe trip home, and until next time, good night.